Okay, well, I'm very excited to be together again with you. We've been on this journey now, I don't know for how long, because I don't know how long you've been studying and the things that the Lord is revealing to you and unfolding for you. It's just an exciting thing to be able to share with one another the things that we're learning. And that's what this whole journey is about. It's about learning. And the thing that's different about learning than just being taught is learning is about application, applying things that we are taught in a real tangible way. In fact, the word talks about it's the truth that you know that sets you free. Well, we don't know it till we've done it. You don't capture that truth until you've been able to prove it with your life and actually apply it and prove that it's true. So learning comes through experience, and that's one of the things that's been really fun for me. Well, I don't know that I'd say fun actually, but it is fun. Fun doesn't mean easy, so maybe I need to clarify that. Fun doesn't mean it's always easy. Sometimes it's hard, but it's always fun on this journey. And I've used this analogy with people before on kind of how the Lord has worked in my life to teach me and to cement those things. I love my times in the classroom. I use the analogy of a classroom and a lab, and I love my times in the classroom. I think we all do, where we're sitting there and we get this, we get revelation and we get new information, and it's just, exciting. And I think the danger is that we become revelation junkies. We get addicted to revelation and look for the next revelation and the next revelation and the next thing, but then we don't go learn it, we don't go apply it. So the way the Lord has worked in my life anyway is He'll give me this amazing revelation, and I just sit in that classroom absorbing and so excited about everything He's showing me. And then it'll be like, okay, time for a pop quiz. Or He takes me to the lab. I mean, sometimes it's these little pop quizzes, and then an experience or a situation will follow what He's shown me. And it's my opportunity to say, okay, you just showed me that. So in this situation right now, practically, how do I do what you just showed me? How do I apply that revelation? And so the lab, the way I equate that to the lab is that He'll take me from the classroom to the lab, and when I'm in the lab, He actually puts me on the Bunsen burner, and He turns up the heat. So circumstances may come that feel really, they feel hot, they feel uncomfortable, but what He's doing is giving me the opportunity to apply that, because He's trying to bake that revelation onto me and have me actually become the revelation He's given me. And I was sharing this analogy with a friend. It's probably been over a year ago, and I've shared it before, but this one particular time we're on the phone and we're talking about things, and I'm sharing this analogy, and as I am speaking out of my mouth, I hear the Lord saying to me, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word came in the flesh. And He said, Trisha, I sent my Word in the flesh because I'm trying to turn your flesh now into the Word. And so He's trying to get us to really grab a hold of what He's showing us of who He is, so that we can apply those revelations that He gives us to our own lives and become that revelation. So we've been on this journey now. We've talked a lot about, the last several things have been about purity and motives and intimacy and iniquity and, kind of the characteristics of God. So it's been kind of this understanding as a whole of, I guess you could say, externals, how things operate, out there. And I wanted to, before we move on to presence, I wanted to kind of sum up in the way that He showed me all the things that we've talked about, because He gave me kind of this image in my head, and He showed me how the pieces fit together. And It's really amazing, and I have to say that people a lot of times will question, yeah, she thinks she hears from the Lord, or there are those that have mocked or talked about, invisible friends and imaginary voices and whatever, but, I'm just not smart enough to make these things up. I'm not smart enough to have something over here and later it be connected over there. That's not in me. So, go with that. It's as you go on this journey, there may be those that don't understand and don't get it, and that's okay. That's okay. They don't have to. It's just where they are. It's not. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you're not hearing from the Lord. It doesn't mean that He's not giving you great revelation and you're following that, and you know it. I mean, there are times when you're just like, I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. I could not have made that up. So. Anyway, so what the Lord did for all the things that we've talked about so far, He gave me kind of this image, and I hope you can see it okay. There's a heart right here in the center, and I'm going to work my way from the beginning of purity all the way through what we've already done. So we start over here with purity. Oh, well, that's not going to work. You can't even see that color. I guess let's just stick with the pink, huh? What do you think about that? Okay, that's not going to work. So let's erase that. Okay, so purity, we started over here with purity. Okay, and then we talked about motives. And of course, motives go right in the center of the heart because motives are a heart issue. Right? So motives we're always talking about our will, which is a heart issue. It's the decisions of our heart. It's where we process the real issues of life. You can search that in Scripture. There's a lot to be said about the things that come out of the heart. So that's where motives go. And then we talked about intimacy, which is here. Intimacy, and then iniquity is here. And you see what He then did is He made this intimacy in this visual. I'm not an artist. I've said that before. There are those in the body gifted in artistry. I'm not one of them. So intimacy is that pivotal thing. It's the thing that everything hinges on, because from that we draw the scale. See, here's the scale. There's purity. Here's iniquity. And so when we talked about the scales of justice and we talked about God's character, God's judgment, everything being in love, that's this side of the scale. And over here is, what we put as the enemy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'll fill in these other two here in just a second. So one of the things I had mentioned, I think it was the first or second session of our journey, I had talked about Matthew 6:33, which is by far, it is my favorite scripture. When I think about the whole thing, when you read in Revelation about the mark of the beast and all those things, 666, I've always thought that 633 is the mark of a believer. So as I was looking at this image, I kind of saw the Lord put, wrong end, Matthew, well, I might need to get darker markers for you guys, Matthew 6:33 over here. And then I felt like He was leading me to the Gospel of John. And so I just started looking, I started searching Scripture for anywhere in Scripture where the numbers 666 are consecutive. So there might be chapter 66 verse 6 or chapter 6 verse 66, which I didn't think there were any chapters that had 66 verses in it. But I landed at John 6:66. And so let's go read that, because this was very fascinating. Let me find it because I have it in my notes. Okay, again, Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And remember, we talked about his righteousness being his ways, his thoughts, and all these things will be added unto you. So, but then when we go to John, in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, we're reading this, this part of the Gospel. The context is that he has just spoken to a massive people, his followers, disciples, who he had talked about being the bread of life and about being the blood. He talked about whoever does not eat of my flesh, right? And I think that people didn't quite understand that. And so there was like this grumbling because it became a very hard word. They talked about it being a hard word. So John 6, 60 through 65 says, on hearing it, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? So aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? What if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. Remember, spirit, flesh counts for nothing, which ties into the scale. The words I have spoken to you are spirit and they are life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. So there's a thing about believing and not believing. Tie that in. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. He went on to say, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled him. So then you get to John 6:66, and this is what that says, 6:66. From this point, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. So I found that really curious, and so as I sat with the Lord about this, I'm like, what are you trying to show me in this? Because, help me understand how these tie. And, I've said before that God speaks through everything. I mean, he's in everything. And so one of the ways that he speaks to me a lot is in numbers. And, there's a whole thing about numerology. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but there's also scriptural or biblical meaning to numbers. I mean, God is a God of numbers. He's a God of precision. So he uses anything and everything. And so biblically or scripturally, when you understand the meaning of these numbers, the number 6 is the number for man. Man was created on the 6th day, and you can do more research in that. I mean, go Google, biblical meanings or scriptural meaning of numbers, whatever. And 3 is the number for God. The three persons, the Trinity, all of the things that go with 3, and you can research that. But what he showed me is that when man seeks after God's ways and God's thoughts, then he's pure. And that is always, this intimacy, I'm going to put this up here. This intimacy was always, as we talked about, is always about obedience. Because as we become more and more intimate with the Lord and we follow him, that surrendered life is based on his motives being pure. Well then, so over here, this is when man seeks after man's ways and man's thoughts, then he is operating out of his own motives, out of his own filters. He's still missing something. He's missing the thoughts and the ways of the Lord. So again, this is about what's missing. Now, I want to talk about obedience, because obedience has to be, what is the motive for your obedience? See, motives are everything. So, if we have love over here and belief over here, then what would go on this side? What is the opposite of belief? Unbelief. What is the opposite of love? How many of you said hate? That would be what we would think is the opposite of love. But scripturally, the Bible tells us that what does love cast out? It casts out fear. So the opposite of love is fear. So our motives are always driven by love or fear, by belief or unbelief. So what is your motive for obeying the Lord? If your motive for walking in obedience is love of him, belief in him, and remember we talk about the fear of the Lord, but remember that word, even though it's translated fear a lot, is not what we think. It is about awe and reverence, and I'll show you what that looks like. Fear of the Lord looks like, oh my gosh, you are so smart. I would have never thought of that. You're the most genius person I know, and you're always right. You always have the best answer for everything, and your heart is always towards every single person in a situation. You are so good. That's what fear of the Lord looks like. It's just this incredible awe of how brilliant he is and how he has the perfect solution in every situation, because he cares for every person in the midst of a situation or circumstance, and he knows what's at work, and he can give you the right perspective. That's fear of the Lord. Fear, the way we think of it, if you're driven by fear, that's not the right motive to obey. Because, we use this a lot. If there is something that is causing you to obey out of fear, I'm telling you right now, it's not of the Lord. It is not of the Lord. If fear is manipulating you into obedience, that is not God. And I can show you that because you can't beat someone with both ends of the stick at the same time. I use that analogy. Both truths can't be true. Because if love casts out fear, God is not going to use fear to draw you to him. He can't use fear, because if he shows up, fear's gone. So if something is causing you to fear to obey him, it's not God. So perfect love casts out fear. And the Bible talks about, especially in the New Testament, it talks about the kingdom is come, and that those in the kingdom, there will be those that take it by force. Well, let's talk about that, because both of those are a force. Fear and love are both a force. But love is the force that has the power to remove fear. So those in the kingdom, those that are taking the kingdom by force, are those that are loving through fear. They're loving through everything to grab hold of the kingdom. It's never, ever, ever about fear. In fact, fear is a symptom. Fear is a symptom of unbelief. If this is love and belief, fear is a symptom of unbelief. So if you know what you fear, if you can name your fear, then that will tell you that your fear exposes what it is you're not believing, what's missing, what's the piece about God that you're not understanding right, or that you're missing about his character. So pay attention to your fear. I mean, fear is really a powerful indicator, if you will. It's like your check engine light. What is that? What is that about? When you feel anything around fear, anxiety, or stress, worry, pay attention to that, because it's telling you what you're not believing about who God is and who he is to you specifically. One of the things that this makes me think of when you go back to the garden, I mean, the story in the garden in the Bible is all about, this is EdenQuest. How do we get back to Eden? Well, basically you get back to Eden by reverse engineering, if you will, what happened in the garden. Well, when we entered in the garden, fear entered. That's where fear came in. After, things happened with Adam and Eve, the serpent and all that. And we'll go into a lot more detail in that later. But that's where fear entered. So the way to get on the other side and get back into Eden as it was intended is by using love to push your way, if you will, through fear. And that's why faith is never fear-based. Fear is not faith. Actually, fear is faith. It's faith in what's not true about God. But what God is after is your faith in who he says he is. And so we demonstrate that faith in who he says he is by releasing the things that make us afraid. So I just kind of wanted to summarize where we've been so far before we move into this whole thing about presence. And I just have to say, this is so exciting what you don't know is everything that has been recorded so far up until today was all done in one day, yesterday. So today, as we're kind of moving into this place to start talking about presence, it's just a very heavy, thick, cloudy, foggy, kind of a drizzly, sweet soaking rain kind of a day. And for those of you that have studied about God's presence, that so captures what his presence is like. It's just, it was the cloud. It was the cloud that the Israelites followed. They followed his presence. And so there's just a sweetness to the atmosphere today. I'm very excited about that. Let you in on a little secret. Again, God's genius. This is not at all what I envisioned this being as he started to release this to me 4.5 years ago, and especially 2 years ago when he gave me the details. This is not how I would have done this, which is so like him. So my plan was that yesterday, today, and then tomorrow we're gonna record today, and then tomorrow, or me and the Lord, because I'm the only one here, and the dog. I'm gonna record today and again tomorrow. And so my plan was to have my hair and makeup done every day, to go, get that done. And so I did that yesterday. I went and had my hair and my makeup done, and but that was not the Lord's plan for today. Today it was, no, you're not going to go have your hair and makeup professionally done. You're going to do it yourself. And, I typically, if I wear makeup, I don't wear foundation. I don't. So in my kit, I have all these special makeups, if I'm really want to do it for a special occasion, but that it wasn't even about that. I mean, I wasn't even allowed to use those items today. This was just about moving into more of just me being me, because we've traveled now for a while and we're getting comfortable with each other. And so, and that's how it is with the Lord. As we journey with him, we find some of those things that we've been using to mask ourselves, or, to kind of hide the things we don't want to have seen. Those start to come off, because the truth of it is God sees it all anyway. So I don't know why it is we think that if we're going to go into his presence, we have to really present ourselves, and it's actually the opposite. To come into his presence, we have to be very raw, very vulnerable, and transparent, and genuine with him, and authentic with him. So one quick note that I will say, because again, I'm house sitting and dog sitting, and because it's raining outside today, the dog is not wanting to go out, not going to want to go out probably. So again, this is real life. Who knows what's going to happen with the dog in the house today? So we're just going to roll with it, and it's just life. So we just go with those moments. So what I want to share about the presence of the Lord is, I'm sure as you studied, we find that entering in his presence, entering into the gates or into his presence, has to do with thanksgiving and praise. And it can be very difficult if you are in a place where you've been really wounded, really hurt, you've got some bitterness and things going on in your life. It can be really, really hard to feel like praising or to have gratitude. And that's what I'm talking about with, taking off the fancy makeup today. It's like, what do I have to let go of to enter into his presence? What do I have to not hold on to anymore? Where do I need to be vulnerable and take some risks? And forgiveness can feel like a huge risk to let go of something. And that's what forgiveness is about, is letting go. It's like an accounting term where you forgive debt and get the balance to zero, and you're taking it off the books. So to get that off the books is through forgiveness, and forgiveness is never ever about what the other person did. It's always about the condition of your heart, and it's about your own freedom, and it's about releasing those things that concern you or that have caused hurt to the Lord, and just being free from that to come into his presence. In fact, unforgiveness actually creates a bondage, or it binds you to the thing you have not forgiven. There's a bondage that's created by that, and it shows up in anger and bitterness and hurt and your inability to move on. So if you want to move on into the presence of the Lord, this might be a good time to just sit before the Lord and ask Him, what are some things that may be hindering your ability to sense His presence. That's the other thing I want to talk to you about. Is there is this, I had this perception that entering into His presence was about going somewhere or doing a certain thing to be in His presence. And that would go back to the Old Testament. I mean, it was, you had to go to the temple to be in His presence. But, God destroyed the temple. I mean, He allowed the temple to be destroyed. Well, when the temple was destroyed, was His presence destroyed? Of course not. I mean, God is. So His presence is everywhere. His presence is wherever you are. It's in your shower, it's in your car, it's in your office, it's in your kitchen, it's in your laundry room. His presence is everywhere. It is right where you are. So it's not about entering into it, it's about having a greater awareness of it. This awareness of His presence in your life, that He's there. So gratitude and praise are the things that increase the awareness of that. And they're very, very powerful. Gratitude is the most powerful, scientifically, it's been proven that gratitude is even more powerful than love to bring peace and calm to emotions. So gratitude's huge. And we'll talk more about that too, and how some of that works and what that looks like. So about 2.5 years ago, I kept hearing the Lord whisper the name Mary to me, and I knew it was Mary, Jesus' mother, and I just kept hearing Him say, Mary, she's a woman of my presence, a woman of my presence, a woman of my presence. And so I had this curiosity, what are you saying about that? And what He showed me is Mary, the mother of Jesus, was the first and only woman in the natural, the only person in the natural who had carried Jesus in the natural and experienced His presence all the way from within her to without her, all the way through life. So, and what He showed me is that, we talk a lot about different characters in the Bible being shadows of Jesus. What He showed me is Mary, as the mother, is the shadow of every believer. And I want to just speak to men, because now that we're moving and we're talking about a female character in the Bible, please don't tune out, because this is so relevant. The things that we're getting ready to speak about the body and about the life of believers is for all of us. It's for all of the body. And so Mary is a shadow of a believer. She's not a shadow of just women. She's the shadow of a believer, because when we say yes to God, when we say yes to Him, to a life, that's when He plants the seed of His Spirit in us. And the whole process, this whole journey that we're on, is about that seed in us growing and nurturing and taking on life. Because the end result is that we want to birth Jesus to the world. I mean, we want to become more and more, we want more people to become more and more aware that we have something growing in us. And so, I just want to speak that to the men, especially. I mean, women, we understand how, we understand pregnancy and birthing and what it is to be a woman and all those things. And I think, when I think about the church, there's been so much talk about us as sons, and for men that feel like, I just can't, I have a hard time grasping what this whole thing about being a bride or a woman. Well, pick yourself up and come put yourself in a woman's shoes. Learning how to be a son is hard for a woman too. So there's truth in it. It's absolutely true that in him we're the same, and that sonship is representative of a child, being a child of God, and we're going to talk more about that. But I really encourage the men especially to hang with us through this talk, at these sessions, these sharing and discussions about Mary and about the woman and believers. So just hang with us, because you're going to be challenged, and that's not a bad thing. So this is where we're going. I mean, we're entering into his presence. We're going to have this greater sense of what it means to live in his presence. And so one of the things, and you know the name of my coaching is Presence Coaching, and again, an acronym. I can't get away from him. You know, you ask for something and he just totally gives it to you in amazing fullness. So the thing about presence is, as he gave me that name for my coaching, I kept hearing him say that one day, you know, presence, 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 and what he wanted to say about presence. And this is about what it is to live in his presence. This is what his presence is about. It's about pursuing. There's that word pursuing from purity again. I'm sorry, I just can't connect those things. He does that. So pursuing righteous excellence in strengthening, energizing, and nurturing Christians everywhere. And that's what God's presence is about. And I want to caution here, you know, the word Christian can have a very negative connotation for many, many, many people. Christian is about studying and following the life of Christ that was in Jesus as an example to the Father. How we enter into a relationship with the Father is through that Christ example that Jesus showed us. So pursuing righteous excellence in strengthening, energizing, and nurturing Christians everywhere. That's what his presence does. It strengthens us, it energizes us, it nurtures us. So that's what presence is about, and we're going to spend several sessions kind of going deep into that. But one of the things that I found very, very fascinating as I studied about Mary and about, you know, I really went into this place of studying about what that would have been like for her, what that would have been like in that culture and in that time. And we're going to talk a whole lot about that. But one thing that really caught me is this whole 430 years, because there were 430 years from the time that basically the Jewish tradition is, you know, the Old Testament ends with Malachi, and I think that's right, Malachi. I don't know why, I just lost that. But the last book in the Old Testament was when they saw God ceasing to speak. And then it was 430 years before Gabriel came onto the scene and spoke this word into Mary. So for 430 years, there's sort of this silence, if you will. Well, there's another 430 years in the Bible, and that's the 430 years that the Israelites were in Egypt before he sent a deliverer to bring them out of Egypt. So there's kind of this correlation with these 430 years of being silent. And but what was fascinating to me is as time has moved on since Jesus' death and resurrection, there's kind of like this correlation that 430 years, what happened in history in that 430 years, can literally happen today in a generation. So that may have been 10 generations. There's been kind of this exponential acceleration, if you will, in the things that happened in that time frame in history, and what God did in that time can literally happen in a generation in our time with the information age and how quickly information gets from one place to another. I mean, it's right here. There's so many changes from generation to generation now that may have taken 430 years back then for a real shift or a change to happen. So I think, do I have anything more to say about? I think I am done for today's session. I mean, we unpacked a lot right here. I hope that soaks in. I hope those will give you things to ponder, to become curious about, and go seek out on your own what the Word has to say about those things. So what we're going to do for our next topic is I really want you to do homework on promise and covenant. Well, what does a promise or a covenant mean? And what's the difference between a promise and a covenant? I mean, in our connotation, in the worldly connotation, in the dictionary, in Scripture, all those things. I mean, you got this now. You know how to do this. So that's the next one, is promise and covenant. So thank you again for letting me be on this journey with you. I hope you're encouraged. I hope this blesses you, and I know you're learning incredible things, because God's desire is to teach us all things. That's why He sent His Son and His Spirit, is so that we could learn. And so, like I said, you don't need another teacher. You don't need me to teach you. He's the best at that anyway. So I hope you're learning good things, and I look forward to our next time together.